kind black teen helps old woman fixing her TV for free. Next day, she shows up at his home with the police. Alex was on his way home from school when he noticed an elderly woman struggling with her grocery bags. He had seen her around the neighborhood, but had never spoken to her before. Her frail frame and tired expression tugged at his heartstrings, and he decided to approach her. "Do you need some help, ma'am?" he asked, offering a warm smile. The woman looked up, her eyes filled with relief and gratitude. She nodded and handed him one of the heavier bags, thankful for the unexpected assistance. As they walked to her house, Alex learned that her name was Mrs. Johnson. She lived alone and had no close family nearby. Their brief conversation revealed her loneliness, and Alex felt a strong urge to do something to help her beyond just carrying her groceries. The following day, Alex passed by Mrs. Johnson's house again on his way home. He noticed her standing outside, looking frustrated as she fiddled with her television remote. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to see if he could help. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Johnson?" he asked, approaching her. She sighed and explained that her TV had stopped working, and she couldn't figure out what was wrong. Technology wasn't her strong suit, and she missed her evening shows. Alex offered to take a look at it for her. He was good with electronics and was confident he could fix it. Mrs. Johnson gratefully accepted his help, inviting him inside. As he tinkered with the TV, they continued to chat, and Alex realized how much he enjoyed her stories and company. Alex quickly discovered the problem with Mrs. Johnson's TV and managed to get it working again. Mrs. Johnson was ecstatic, her face lighting up with a bright smile. "Thank you so much, Alex," she said, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "You've made my day." She offered him a small reward for his help, but Alex declined. "No need, ma'am," he said kindly. "I'm just glad I could help." His simple act of kindness had made a significant difference in her day, and he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Before he left, Mrs. Johnson insisted on giving him a glass of lemonade and a slice of homemade pie. They sat on her porch, enjoying the treats in each other's company. Alex promised to check in on her regularly, feeling a newfound connection to the elderly woman. Mrs. Johnson's living room was a quaint, cozy space filled with memories of a life well lived. Family photos, trinkets from travels, and shelves of books gave the room a warm and welcoming feel. As Alex worked on the TV, Mrs. Johnson regaled him with tales of her younger days. She spoke of her late husband, a kind and loving man who had passed away several years ago. She shared stories of their travels, their children who had moved away, and the many happy moments they had shared. Alex listened intently, charmed by her stories and the richness of her experiences. Within an hour, Alex had fixed the TV, and the familiar sound of Mrs. Johnson's favorite show filled the room. She clapped her hands in delight, thanking him profusely. Alex smiled, feeling content and happy to have made a difference in her day. Little did he know that this simple act of kindness would soon turn his world upside down. As Alex and Mrs. Johnson continued to talk, she shared more about her life. She had been a school teacher for over 30 years, a profession she loved dearly. Her eyes sparkled with fondness as she recalled the countless children she had taught and the impact she had made on their lives. She talked about the challenges of growing older and living alone. Her stories resonated with Alex, who had a close relationship with his own grandmother. He realized how important it was for elderly people to have companionship and support, and he was glad to be there for her. Mrs. Johnson's stories made Alex reflect on his own life and aspirations. He admired her resilience and the positive impact she had on her community. As he left her house that evening, he felt inspired to continue helping those in need, not knowing how much his life was about to change. The next morning, Mrs. Johnson was still overjoyed about her TV being fixed. She decided to bake a cake as a token of appreciation for Alex's kindness. She knew it wasn't much, but it was her way of saying thank you for his help and for taking the time to listen to her stories. She wrapped the cake carefully and decided to deliver it to Alex's house. She didn't know exactly where he lived, but she remembered seeing him walking from the direction of a certain street. With determination, she set out to find him, eager to show her gratitude. As she walked, she felt a sense of excitement and nervousness. She hoped Alex would like the cake and that it would convey her appreciation. Little did she know that her simple gesture would lead to an unexpected and dramatic turn of events. Alex lived in a modest home with his mother and younger sister, Emma. Their house was small, but filled with love and warmth. Despite their financial struggles, they supported each other and made the best of what they had. Alex's mother worked long hours to provide for the family, and Alex did his best to help out whenever he could. That afternoon, Alex returned home to the usual hustle and bustle. His mother was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, while Emma was doing her homework at the dining table. The comforting scent of a home-cooked meal filled the air, making Alex smile. He was grateful for his family and the life they had built together. As they sat down to eat, Alex recounted his encounter with Mrs. Johnson, telling his family about the stories she had shared and how happy she had been when he fixed her TV. His mother praised him for his kindness, and Emma looked up to him with admiration. It was a typical evening in the Johnson household, full of love and support. Alex was a dedicated student and a hardworking son. He balanced his schoolwork with a part-time job at a local grocery store to help support his family. He had dreams of going to college and making a better life for himself and his loved ones. His mother often reminded him how proud she was of his determination and resilience. At school, Alex was well liked by his teachers and peers. He was known for his helpful nature and positive attitude. His best friend Mark often joked that Alex was the neighborhood's unofficial handyman, always ready to lend a helping hand to anyone in need. Despite the challenges he faced, Alex remained optimistic and focused on his goals. His routine was busy, but he managed to find time for his hobbies. He loved reading and had a passion for technology. Fixing gadgets and electronics was something he enjoyed, and he often used his skills to help others, just as he had done with Mrs. Johnson. Little did he know that this very skill would soon lead to a life-changing event. The next morning, Alex followed his usual routine. He woke up early, helped his sister get ready for school, and prepared a quick breakfast. His mother had already left for work, so it was up to him to make sure everything ran smoothly at home. He enjoyed these quiet moments in the morning, giving him time to think and plan his day. After dropping Emma off at school, Alex headed to his classes. The day went by quickly, filled with lectures, assignments, and a few laughs with friends. He was looking forward to the weekend, as it would give him a chance to relax and maybe visit Mrs. Johnson again. He wanted to check on her and make sure she didn't need any more help. But that afternoon, as he walked home from school, he noticed something unusual. Two police cars were parked in front of his house, and a small crowd had gathered. His heart skipped a beat, and a sense of dread washed over him. He quickened his pace, not knowing what to expect, but fearing the worst. Alex approached his house, his mind racing with possibilities. As he got closer, he saw Mrs. Johnson standing with the police officers, looking distressed. The neighbors were whispering among themselves, their eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before them. Alex's mother was standing at the door, her face a mask of worry. "Alex, come here," one of the officers called out. Alex walked up, trying to stay calm despite the anxiety building inside him. Mrs. Johnson looked at him with a mixture of sadness and concern, and he couldn't understand what was happening. He had only helped her. Why was she here with the police? "Mrs. Johnson says something went missing from her home," the officer explained. "She believes it was taken during the time you were there, helping her with the TV." Alex's stomach dropped. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had only tried to help, and now he was being accused of theft. The police officers asked Alex to recount his visit to Mrs. Johnson's house. He explained in detail how he had fixed her TV and shared a pleasant conversation. He insisted that he hadn't taken anything and had no idea what could have gone missing. His mother stood by his side, supporting him through the shocking accusation. Mrs. Johnson spoke up, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to believe it, Alex, but after you left, I realized my late husband's watch was missing. It's a valuable family heirloom, and I can't find it anywhere." Tears welled up in her eyes, and Alex felt a pang of guilt. Not because he had taken it, but because she was in distress. The officers decided to search Alex's home, looking for the missing watch. Alex's mother reluctantly agreed, wanting to clear her son's name. The neighbors watched as the police entered the house, whispering and speculating about the situation. Alex felt humiliated and helpless, praying that the watch would be found and his innocence proven. The search was thorough and invasive. The officers went through each room, checking every nook and cranny for the missing watch. Alex and his family watched anxiously, knowing there was nothing to find but feeling the weight of suspicion nonetheless. The atmosphere was tense, and the neighbors' whispers grew louder. After what felt like an eternity, the officers finished their search and returned empty-handed. "We didn't find anything," one of them said. "We'll continue our investigation, but for now, we'll leave you be." Alex felt a mix of relief and frustration. He was glad they hadn't found anything incriminating, but the suspicion still lingered. Mrs. Johnson apologized profusely, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I didn't know what else to do. That watch means so much to me, and I was desperate to find it." Alex nodded, understanding her desperation, but still hurt by the accusation. He promised to help her find the watch, determined to clear his name and restore her trust in him. In the days that followed, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of being watched and judged. The news of the accusation spread quickly through the neighborhood, and he could sense the change in people's attitudes towards him. Friends who had once greeted him warmly now seemed distant and wary, and the whispers behind his back became a constant source of anxiety. At school, the situation was no different. Some classmates looked at him with suspicion, while others avoided him altogether. Even his teachers seemed to treat him differently, though they tried to hide their discomfort. Alex felt isolated and confused, struggling to understand how his good deed had led to such a painful ordeal. Despite the fear and uncertainty, Alex remained determined to prove his innocence. He continued to help his family and do well in his studies, but the weight of the accusation hung heavily over him. He knew he had to find the real culprit and restore his reputation, not just for himself, but for his family and for Mrs. Johnson. Alex's mother, Maria, was deeply concerned about the impact the accusation was having on her son. She saw how it weighed on him, how it affected his mood and interactions with others. She knew Alex was innocent, but she also knew that proving it would be a difficult and stressful process. She decided to speak with Mrs. Johnson again, hoping to find some way to resolve the situation. "Mrs. Johnson, my son would never steal from you or anyone else. He has always been honest and hardworking." "There must be some misunderstanding," Maria pleaded, hoping to appeal to the elderly woman's sense of reason. Mrs. Johnson was visibly torn. She didn't want to believe that Alex was capable of such a thing, but the missing watch and the timing of its disappearance had led her to suspect him. "I hope you're right, Maria, I truly do. But I need to find that watch. It's the only thing I have left of my husband," she said, her voice breaking. Alex continued to maintain his innocence, despite the growing pressure from the community and the ongoing police investigation. He knew that the only way to clear his name was to find the real culprit and recover the missing watch. He began to think about who else could have taken it and how he could prove it. He revisited the day he had helped Mrs. Johnson, trying to recall every detail and possible clue. He remembered seeing a few neighbors around her house, but none of them had seemed suspicious at the time. He decided to talk to his best friend Mark about the situation, hoping for some fresh perspective. Mark was supportive and believed in Alex's innocence. "We'll figure this out, Alex. There's got to be something we're missing," he said, determined to help his friend. Together, they started to gather information and talk to people in the neighborhood, hoping to uncover any leads that could point them to the real thief. Determined to clear his name, Alex and Mark began their investigation by talking to the neighbors who had been around Mrs. Johnson's house on the day of the incident. They hoped that someone might have seen something unusual or noticed a suspicious person. Most of the neighbors were sympathetic but didn't have any useful information. One neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, mentioned seeing a young man she didn't recognize hanging around the street that afternoon. "He looked a bit out of place," she recalled, "but I didn't think much of it at the time." Maybe he had something to do with it? Alex and Mark made a note of her description and decided to keep an eye out for anyone matching it. The boys also visited local pawn shops, thinking that the thief might have tried to sell the watch. They showed pictures of the watch to the shop owners, but none of them had seen it. Despite the lack of concrete leads, Alex refused to give up. He knew the truth was out there, and he was determined to find it. The police returned to Alex's house for a second search, this time more thorough and invasive. They went through every room again, checking under furniture, inside cabinets, and even tearing through personal belongings. Alex and his family felt humiliated, but they knew they had no choice but to cooperate. The search yielded nothing, and the officers left empty-handed once more. Despite this, the suspicion and whispers in the neighborhood continued. Alex felt like he was living under a constant cloud of doubt and mistrust. His mother tried to reassure him, but the stress was taking its toll on both of them. In a desperate attempt to find some peace, Alex focused even more on his studies and his job. He avoided unnecessary interactions with neighbors, preferring to keep his head down and stay out of trouble. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the shadow of the accusation. The weight of the suspicion was almost unbearable. Alex noticed the way people looked at him, the hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when he walked by. It felt like the whole world had turned against him, and he struggled to maintain his composure. His once tight-knit community now seemed like a hostile environment. At school, the situation was equally challenging. Some classmates avoided him, while others whispered behind his back. Even some teachers seemed to treat him differently, their trust in him shaken by the rumors. Alex's best friend Mark remained by his side, offering support and encouragement. Despite the negativity, Alex was determined not to let the situation break him. He continued to work hard in school and at his part-time job, knowing that proving his innocence was the only way to regain his place in the community. He refused to let the accusation define him or destroy his future. The community's reaction to the accusation was mixed. Some people believed in Alex's innocence and continued to support him, while others were quick to judge and spread rumors. The divide in opinions created a palpable tension in the neighborhood, with debates about Alex's guilt or innocence becoming a common topic of conversation. Mr. Rodriguez, a retired mechanic who had known Alex since he was a child, was one of his staunchest defenders. Alex is a good kid. He's always been respectful and hardworking. This whole thing doesn't make sense, he told anyone who would listen. His words provided some comfort to Alex and his family during this difficult time. On the other hand, there were those like Mrs. Thompson who were quick to condemn. "You never really know people, do you? It's always the ones you least expect," she said, her tone filled with suspicion. The contrasting reactions from the community added to the stress and uncertainty Alex was already feeling. Doubt and distrust began to seep into Alex's daily life. He found it hard to concentrate on his studies, and his job at the grocery store became increasingly difficult as customers treated him with suspicion. The sense of isolation grew stronger with each passing day, and he struggled to maintain his usual optimism. His mother, Maria, noticed the changes in him. She tried to reassure him, reminding him of his strength and integrity. "We know the truth, Alex, and the truth will come out eventually. You just have to hold on," she said, offering him a comforting hug. Despite her words, the pain of the situation was evident in her eyes. Alex's best friend, Mark, continued to stand by him, offering unwavering support. "We'll get through this, Alex. I believe in you, and so do a lot of other people. Don't let the doubters get to you," he said, trying to lift his friend's spirits. Their friendship became a crucial source of strength for Alex during this trying time. Alex was fortunate to have a few loyal friends who believed in his innocence and stood by him through the ordeal. Mark was his constant companion, helping him with the investigation and offering moral support. Their bond grew stronger as they faced the challenges together, determined to clear Alex's name. Another friend, Sarah, who had known Alex since elementary school, also believed in him. She used her connections and resources to gather more information and spread the word about Alex's innocence. "We'll find the truth, Alex. I know you didn't do it," she said, her determination matching his own. Their loyalty gave Alex the strength to keep going, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. He was grateful for their support and knew that, with their help, he stood a better chance of finding the real culprit and restoring his reputation. Despite the whispers and judgment from some classmates, Alex found unexpected support from his teachers and a few school staff members. His history teacher, Mr. Reynolds, called him aside one day after class. "Alex, I know this must be incredibly difficult for you, but I want you to know that I believe in your integrity. Keep your head up and the truth will come out, he said, offering a reassuring smile. The school counselor, Miss Parker, also reached out to Alex, offering him a safe space to talk about his feelings and fears. You're not alone in this, Alex. It's important to take care of your mental health during such a stressful time. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here, she said, providing a much-needed outlet for his emotions. These gestures of support helped Alex feel less isolated and more hopeful. Knowing that there were people who believed in him and were willing to stand by him gave him the courage to continue his fight for justice. As the days turned into weeks, the clamor for justice grew louder. Alex's friends and supporters organized a community meeting to address the situation and discuss how they could help clear his name. They invited neighbors, local leaders, and even the police to join the conversation. At the meeting, Mr. Rodriguez spoke passionately about Alex's character and the importance of standing by the truth. We need to support our young people and give them the benefit of the doubt. Alex has always been a good kid, and we should help him prove his innocence, he urged the attendees. The meeting sparked a renewed sense of solidarity within the community. People who had previously been skeptical began to reconsider their stance, and more neighbors came forward with information that might help the investigation. The collective effort gave Alex and his family a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. One afternoon, while Alex and Mark were going through their notes and trying to piece together any potential clues, they had a breakthrough. Mark remembered a detail that seemed insignificant at first but now stood out. Do you remember that guy Mrs. Peterson mentioned? The one who looked out of place? What if he's connected to the theft? He suggested. They decided to follow up on this lead, asking around if anyone had seen the mysterious young man again. Their persistence paid off when they learned that he had been seen near a local pawn shop a few days after the watch went missing. Alex and Mark hurried to the shop, hoping to find more information. The pawn shop owner, Mr. Lee, recognized the description of the young man and recalled him trying to sell a watch that matched the description of Mrs. Johnson's missing heirloom. He didn't have any ID, so I refused to buy it. But he seemed nervous, like he was hiding something, Mr. Lee said. Alex felt a surge of hope. They were finally on the right track. Armed with this new information, Alex and Mark reported their findings to the police. Officer Daniels, who had been handling the case, took their lead seriously and promised to follow up. We'll look into this right away. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, he said, reassuring Alex that they were making progress. Meanwhile, Alex and Mark continued their own investigation. They managed to find the young man's name, Kevin, through a mutual acquaintance. Kevin was known for getting into trouble and had a reputation for petty theft. It seemed likely that he was involved in the disappearance of Mrs. Johnson's watch. They shared this information with Officer Daniels, who arranged to bring Kevin in for questioning. Alex felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. He hoped that this would finally prove his innocence and end the nightmare he had been living through. The wait for answers felt interminable. When the police brought Kevin in for questioning, he initially denied any involvement in the theft. However, under pressure and presented with the evidence against him, he eventually confessed. He admitted to stealing the watch and trying to sell it at the pawn shop. Kevin explained that he had seen Alex helping Mrs. Johnson and took advantage of the situation to commit the theft unnoticed. Officer Daniels informed Alex and his family about the confession. The relief they felt was overwhelming. Mrs. Johnson was also informed, and though saddened by the betrayal, was grateful that the watch would be returned to her. She realized how wrong she had been to suspect Alex and felt a deep sense of regret. The community's reaction was swift. People who had doubted Alex now rallied to support him, apologizing for their hasty judgments and offering their assistance in any way they could. Alex felt a weight lifted off his shoulders, but the experience had left a lasting impact on him and his family. With Kevin's confession, Alex's name was finally cleared. The police returned the watch to Mrs. Johnson, and she personally visited Alex's house to apologize. I'm so sorry, Alex. I should have never doubted you. You've shown such kindness and integrity, and I deeply regret my actions, she said, her voice filled with remorse. Alex accepted her apology graciously. I understand, Mrs. Johnson. I know how important that watch is to you. I just hope we can move past this and remember the good moments, he replied. feeling a sense of closure. The experience had been painful, but it had also brought out the best in him and his community. The neighbors who had doubted Alex were also quick to apologize, expressing their regret for jumping to conclusions. The community came together to celebrate Alex's exoneration, organizing a small gathering to show their support and admiration for his resilience and strength. At the community gathering, Mrs. Johnson took the opportunity to publicly apologize to Alex and his family. Standing before the neighbors, she said, "I want to apologize to Alex and his family for the distress my actions caused. Alex's kindness and integrity never wavered, and I am deeply sorry for having doubted him." Her words were met with applause and nods of agreement. Alex's mother, Maria, also spoke, expressing gratitude for the community's support. "We are thankful to everyone who stood by us and helped prove Alex's innocence. This has been a challenging time, but it has also shown us the power of unity and support," she said. The gathering turned into a celebration of not just Alex's exoneration, but also the strength and resilience of the community. People shared stories, laughter, and promises to be more understanding and supportive of one another in the future. It was a moment of healing and renewal for everyone involved. Inspired by the support and kindness he received from his community, Alex decided to channel his experience into something positive. He and his friends, along with supportive neighbors, started a community initiative to help those in need, focusing on elderly residents like Mrs. Johnson, who might need assistance with everyday tasks. They organized regular visits to check on the elderly, offering help with chores, repairs, and companionship. The initiative quickly gained momentum, drawing in volunteers from all over the neighborhood. It became a source of pride and unity for the community, showing that something good could come from even the most challenging situations. Alex's experience had taught him the importance of kindness, resilience, and the power of community. He felt a renewed sense of purpose and was determined to continue making a positive impact, inspired by the lessons he had learned and the support he had received. As the months passed, life returned to normal for Alex and his family. The community's support and the success of the new initiative helped heal the wounds left by the false accusation. Alex felt more connected to his neighbors than ever before, and the bonds formed during the difficult times proved to be strong and lasting. Mrs. Johnson remained a close friend of the family, grateful for Alex's forgiveness and the kindness he continued to show her. She often participated in the community initiative, sharing her stories and wisdom with the younger volunteers, enriching their lives with her experiences. Alex's future looked bright. With his name cleared and the support of his community, he felt confident and hopeful. The ordeal had changed him, making him stronger and more determined to make a difference. It was the beginning of a new chapter, filled with promise and the knowledge that, no matter what challenges came his way, he had the strength and support to overcome them.